Okay, so I'm back, and you can see I've just went ahead and I've outlined everything nice and dark, and they're not perfect. And okay, but hopefully you can see now that that interior space was defined really well. Everything back to the vanishing point, just the same as before. And so I'm going to go ahead and shade it in. Now, in the last video, I kind of talked you through shading stuff, to create the atmospheric perspective. This time I'm going to figure that you watched it, and I'm not going to do really anything different in this one. As you can see, it still has the same top is kind of dark and bottom is kind of, dark, and then it gets, well, it would go lighter towards the horizon, but we don't really see the horizon, but we can still see it getting lighter as it's going down. I'm going to throw the shadow out this way, but that's okay. I'm going to do some of the basic shading first, and then, don't worry, I'll talk more. But, you can see here in the inside how I've made it darker because that's just natural, right? Maybe a little bit of lightness around the window itself. Okay. Anyways, but I'm just going to go ahead and start shading with my wooden pencil using the edge, and I'll be back. Okay, so I've shaded in a lot of this stuff now. This doesn't have to take a long time. Once again, with the wooden pencil, it really doesn't. This literally, I timed myself as I was doing this, and it took about 8 minutes to get this basic shading in. Now, I've got different values in different places, and there's kind of a reason, right? Well, obviously, as I've been talking about with the atmospheric perspective, it's darker at the tops and bottoms and gets lighter. But then there's a few other things. So obviously shading it nice and dark in here because there's going to be less light. I made the fence rather dark to contrast with the building, which was a little bit lighter. Contrast is one of the things that we'll learn about later on. I made the fence lighter though here because I'm going to put glass here, or trying to make an effect of glass. So making that lighter a little bit to get things started. Here you'll see that I've shaded in the sort of impression of a shadow. So I figured that my light would be coming in this way. And so, I didn't draw guidelines or anything like that. I just kind of figured like, well, okay, that's what makes sense here, here. So that's where that is going to be, right? And so I shaded in there. And I made the plant nice and dark because that way it sort of contrasts with the building here and gives it a little bit more weight, even though it's much smaller than the building. Okay, so from there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and probably take a piece of paper and maybe rub this out a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. It's okay. I'm in a sort of a paused section of it.
I just needed to connect the second cord.
Okay, so by rubbing things down, that did soften things up a little bit. And now I'm going to put in a few extra bits of shading here and there. As well as putting in some texture. So let's think about it for a second. So maybe under the eave right here, maybe a little bit more shadow. Okay, under the window right here. So if we can assume that maybe this sticks out a little bit. Here, we'll give it even an extra line right there. And you see how that's really giving it some depth. It's those little things that really count. And we'll give it a little bit of shadow under there. You can see how that's really popping things out. We'll give it a little bit of shadow under this one as well. And there too, it's making it more three-dimensional. All right, so now I think what I'm going to be more concerned in is maybe taking away some of the shading and using my eraser and whatnot. But first, okay, so let's give it the impression of a little bit of grass. So I don't have to draw like every single blade of grass, just some, a few clumps, right? So if you did the texture exercises, you know that everything clumps, and nothing more so than grass. Grass really likes to clump together. You'll also notice that I didn't do the bottoms really strong, with strong outlines, because I knew I was going to come back in here and put a little something by those bottoms. Now, thinking about things logically, you know that of course things are going to be a little bit taller up front, the blades of grass, and by the time they get back here, much shorter. Of course, right? That's just thinking. And so, will I put that everywhere? No, not everywhere. Just sort of setting up a pattern. And once again, am I drawing every individual blade of grass? No, I might here or there. But what you really should learn is the power of the scribble. And some places I'm naturally pushing down darker. In some places I'm leaving more medium, and some places a little bit more light. So even everything clumps. So even the groups might tend to clump together. So I'm getting some patterns of darks and lights. And that's how I'm going to get that a little bit more believable. It's okay. Remember, these are not finished be-all, end-all drawings. We're going to end up doing a really nice one at the very end. But practice, right? To just do as good as you can. Okay, so that's giving me a little bit of grass, maybe a little bit over here. Okay, and so up here, maybe in front of your shed, you'd probably have like a little bit of dirt or gravel. So, whereas the grass was like, well, you know, grassy, right? And this is going to be more scribbly little round shapes, more like little stones. And I don't have to draw every little stone. You know, one trick, if you really want things to be very accurate looking, is every once in a while draw a stone, draw a complete one, right? And that will make everything else look like there's a bunch of them. Because if you go out and if you look like at a bunch of gravel or a tree with a million leaves on it or whatever, those leaves and whatnot are not all going to be perfectly visible at all times, right? They're going to be at all different angles, and some are in front of others and whatever, right? But every once in a while you'll see one that, kind of defines that perfect leaf shape. And so if you just throw a few little perfect ones in there, here and there, not too many, right? Then that will make all your other sort of angular or scribbly or round shapes give the impression of being a bunch of leaves or a bunch of gravel or a bunch of whatever, right? And even here, you know, I want to get my shapes, my little scribbles a little bit bigger as they go forward. You know, and once again, let me define just a few of those and maybe a few clumps of those. And that's what's going to give me the impression of it being a bunch of stone. Maybe in between my stones that have more of that sort of thing going on. That makes sense, right? Maybe next to the edge of things, because oftentimes next to the edge of things here, give it a little impression of a part of the building there. Okay. Alrighty, cool. And let's see, where else? Oh, maybe in here, let's give these stones a little bit more texture. And these would be low, flat forms, so we want to give them a little bit of a shadow side, right? And some areas that are going to be a little bit brighter, right? Something like that. And here, under here, so if this is a three-dimensional thing that's coming down, then it would have more shadow under there, wouldn't it? And we'll make that a little bit darker. Make that darker in there. Right. And coming around, we'll have this be a little bit darker underneath, sort of a rim right here. That's not going to get a lot of light, is it? Right. Then maybe up underneath these leaves. All right, and we'll even get some of the leaves darker than some of the other parts of the leaves. You know, and as I'm doing this, I'm kind of trying to think about forms and, you know, well, where would have shadow and where would catch the light, that kind of thing. Like down in the depth here would probably have more in the way of shadow. Things out on the tips would have more light. Things with a leading edge would have more light. Underneath the plant there'd be more shadow. Okay, good enough, good enough. And, all right, where else? Where else needs to happen? Okay, maybe a little bit more rough in here, just with my edge. Alrighty, good enough. And, oh, maybe in the fence, just a few little linies. You know, just a old cedar fence. Oh, that made a big difference. And over here too. Now remember, in this one, I'm gonna go same thing but lighter, and do that lighter a little bit. Okay. Oh, and I think I'll just fake in a couple of tools in here, like I did in the last one, and that will really sort of cement the idea that this is an interior space by putting some objects in there. And you know, you could put all kinds of stuff in there. I'm just gonna put a little shovel. And I'm not going to put a lot of detail into that. And what I put on the other one, I put like a little rake, maybe. Something like that. Yeah, there we go. Maybe another little thing sitting right in here. Just something. I mean, there you could have like a lot more stuff. Maybe making it even a little bit darker, maybe even especially up here. There'd be very, very little light up there. All right. Okay, cool. And so now maybe using my eraser to clean things up. And by the way, when I smudged around, it gave this front part just a little bit of color as well, but not a lot. And so now when I erase out where the trim is, it'll make the trim as if it was just a little bit brighter. You know, we don't know the color of this. Oh, but here we'll put this in shadow a little bit. Wouldn't it be? That's the edge. So it goes into the building a little bit there. That'll have a little bit of shadow on it. Here. Okay, we'll put just a little bit of shadow under there. Oh, let's see right here. And you know, my lines are a little bit bent, but you know, who knows, man? If you had a shed, maybe it would be not totally perfect. And maybe a little bit, I'll take out a little bit over here. Just to lighten that up a little bit, but not too much. So, you know, with my eraser, you know, here I can really get, you know, like erase off a lot of it, right? Here, maybe very light pressure. Okay, let's see, where else? Maybe erase some of the highlights on the plant. Okay. So that's going to give the plant a nice texture and give it a few highlights. A little bit more volume. See how that's really coming alive now, isn't it? It's really looking a lot more three-dimensional maybe here on this planter, excuse me, on this pot right there. Ooh, maybe a little bit on the stones. So a little bit more there, a little bit less in here because this is in the shadow, right? So I'll be a little bit more gentle as I erase out there. Yeah, let's see, where else? Maybe in here, just a little bit scribbling around. Same way that I did my little bit of scribbly here. I'll kind of scribble with the eraser, just a little bit here and there. Try not to be too regular with where I'm going with that. All right, over here, boop, 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 boop. Kind of blend that eraser back in, and that's giving it a really interesting texture. Okay, where else? Maybe this would have a little bit of light on it. Who knows? On that handle right there. Who knows? Yeah, a little bit of shadow from those. Okay, so now on the window, I think what I'll do is I'm just gonna cut right across, right, sort of at a diagonal, and just here and there, just a little streaky, and that's just gonna give it the effect. Maybe some places a little bit harder erasing than others, that there's just something there. I'll do the same thing over here on this side. Okay, some places a little bit stronger erasing than others to give it that effect that there is glass there. And, well, good enough, right? So now, remember, I want you to label things. So this one is perspective drawing 2. Oops, excuse me, drawing 3. Okay, and what are we doing? We're doing 1 point perspective. And we are using interior shapes. That would be these ones right here. And interior space, as well as atmospheric perspective. Okay, so I want your name down here. So your last name, your first name, and the period number, and this is exercise number 3. So there you go. And, oh, I think, you know what? I think that could be a little bit darker right in there. Just a little bit. Ooh, that really changed things. Those little things. Well, anyways, I hear a lot of nice music outside. Sounds like they're having a party, so enough of this stuff. I'll go join the party.